Nope.
And that, my friends, is why I'll never review the anime Fooly Cooly. Hey! Whoa! Wait, Ryuk from Death Note? What are you doing here? You dropped this. No, I didn't. Because I threw that out. Well, why'd you throw it out? Well, common knowledge of that show tells me that anybody who picks that up is in for some pretty bad luck. I mean, yeah, the power to kill anybody is kind of awesome, but usually it doesn't work out well for the person that has possession of it. Oh, come on. I've been in the deaf world for long enough, waiting for you, yes, you, Tyrone the God 3, to do something interesting. Well, my channel. Like I said, something interesting. Aw. So I figured, give him the Death Note. Maybe he'll do something cool with it. So, are you gonna pick it up? Or am I just gonna have to kill you? Whoa, you're just gonna kill me off the bat? Yeah, I gotten pretty bored, so I've decided to just start offing people. Hold on. I think we can reach a compromise here, Ryuk. I don't want to die. I still have too much I need to do. And you want to be entertained. How about I do the review of the anime that you're actually in? Excuse me? Yeah, I do the review of your series, Death Note. It is my second favorite anime. Sounds interesting. Sounds like it could be fun. You said you'll do me? Well, the main characters are actually L and Light, but you know that you're in the anime itself, so why not? Fine, whatever. Do the entire review, or else I'll kill you. Whoa. I can't do an entire review of my favorite anime in just one video. That wouldn't do it any justice. I've done tons of videos on Pokemon, and even more, and even some on Dragon Ball Z as well. This is my second favorite anime. I feel it deserves multiple parters. Do whatever you have to. I just know that you better have an entire Death Note review done. That way I won't have to kill you. Alright, I got you, Ryuk. An entire review of Death Note. So, let's get started. This should be interesting. This is definitely no exaggeration. Death Note is by far one of my most favorite anime of all time. I've watched it a grand total of 3 times, which isn't hard considering that it's 37 episodes long, but I can definitely say I enjoy it each time. With Dragon Ball Z being my favorite anime, no one would guess that my second favorite anime deals with the battle of the minds rather than physical fighting. Death Note is a detective, somewhat sci-fi series about a young boy named Light Yagami, who discovers a notebook that has the power to kill anyone whose name is written within the notebook. Looking at it at first glance and me watching it for the first time, I thought that this concept was rather interesting, as no other anime I watched ever featured this type of concept at all. Aside from the notebook itself, the anime is mostly a realistic fiction involving CSI/FBI style of chasing a serial killer based on morals that people may have conflicted with before. What I mean by this is that the Death Note brings up a question that people to this day have different answers to. I'm gonna ask you all, the viewers, this right now and check to see how many answers I get in the comment section. The question is it alright to kill criminals even if that makes you a criminal yourself? This is the moral question that makes the basis for Death Note and makes the roles for both Light Yagami and L's characters very ambiguous, which makes the show even greater. It was up to you to decide who was the good guy or the bad guy in the series. At first, I was rooting for Light, but since the series started off with him. It took me a while to realize this though. Light's a murderer. The very thing he is trying to stop. The symbol that makes Light stand out from other main characters, though, in this anime is corruption. Power in the wrong hands can corrupt a person, and they will be begin to use that power to levels that far exceed their initial purpose. But enough about the symbolism. Let's jump into the series of the first 17 episodes, which I like to dub the Kira Saga. Now, you may be asking yourself, Tyrone, why 17? The series has 37 episodes and 2 special episodes. Well, I feel it's easier to review Death Note in sections because while it does only have 37 episodes, Death Note's story changes settings between certain episodes, and the tone and the situation changes in sections of the episode. For example, Death Note is nowhere near as long as Dragon Ball Z, but like Dragon Ball Z, the focus of the plot shifts a little bit. During the episodes 18 to 27 it shifts, and then shifts again during episodes 28 to 37. So far this video I'll be reviewing the first 17 because they cover a lot of the events that happen in the series up till episode 18. So let's begin. The series begins with our antagonist, I guess, Light Yagami, who is basically looking at the world and viewing how disgusting it is. I say this because a lot of the criminal activity has been going on, and he can hear bases of people dying by murders and everything else. Also, we cut to Ryuka in the Shinigami realm. First, what are you doing? I just felt like I needed to say that. So, Ryuka heads off to the Earth realm and states that he dropped his Death Note and he needs to go retrieve it. All of the other Shinigami in that realm are basically bored, but Ryuka has a plan to entertain himself. When he drops the notebook, shortly after, Light Yagami sees it near the high school and decides to pick it up. He starts reading it because it catches his interest. And then he realizes that the rules of the Death Note state that you can kill someone if you write their name in the Death Note. Also, you must have the victim's face in mind so that people with the same first and last name won't end up dying. At first, Light sees this as nothing more than those chain letters that you see where you have to email this or else your best friend will die or some stupid crap like that. But then his thoughts immediately change, however, as he decides to play with this concept a little bit. When he's at a grocery store or a convenience store or whatever, a woman is about to get raped. She runs away from these rapists and Light writes the guy's name down because he's a criminal that's been wanted for some time now. Once he writes the guy's name down, the guy ends up getting ran over by a truck and Light starts to think, is this really what's going to happen? And he starts to freak out. I mean, common human knowledge would tell you that if you first murder somebody that you really didn't intend on murdering, you're going to psychologically break down at some point. But then, a couple of weeks later, Light starts to think about things for a second. Ryu comes in and greets himself in front of Light, which scares the crap out of him. He thinks that Ryuka is the one that's going to kill him based on the fact that he's used the notebook, but in actuality, Ryuka has no means to try to kill Light whatsoever. He just noticed that Light picked up his Death Note. Pay close attention to this because Ryuka actually has 2 Death Notes, which is a very important plot point that I'll view in episode 3 of my reviews. Anyway, Light states that he's been doing a lot of thinking. In the course of the time that he had the Death Note, he realized that this Death Note more or less is real. He does have the power to kill people if he writes their names down in the notebook. So he's used this to his advantage and decided to write down criminals' names in it. Why criminals? So that he can slowly make the world a better place. He starts off with major criminals and then slowly goes down to minor criminals until a point where crime is basically not a factor. Light's overall intention is to make a utopia, if you will, free of crime, free of fear, free of unnecessary violence. And at first, these intentions are really good, but pay close attention to later on during the series as we see the Light gets more and more corrupt. This hypocritical mindset of his is basically his view of what justice is. He kills the criminals, but in actuality, that makes him a criminal himself. Light goes over this and reveals that he's an honor student, which he is, and makes one of the highest grades, and he's also very popular, which makes him a little kind of unrealistic, but in its basis, for what it's worth, it helps. Anyway, with Light having resources to overall criminals, even criminals that aren't shown on the news, based on the fact that his father, Mr. Soichiro Yagami, is a part of the Japanese MPA, also known as the police force or the task force, if you will. Because of this and him having connections to this, Light also wanted to study in law as well so he could become a detective. This means that he has easy access and has even helped his father in a couple of the cases that he's had before. So, because of this, Light has easy access to all of the criminals' information. A lot of the rest of the episodes are dedicated to Light doing various things with the notebook and doing experiments, to see how far he has with power with the notebook. He even reveals some episodes where he tries to hide the notebook. That way, when he leaves, he can find effective ways to hide the notebook without it being discovered by other people. These methods include leaving several different types of traps inside of his room. One of the traps is actually very elaborate. You open up the desk and there seems to be nothing, but if you use a tiny little inside of a pen to lift the underside, then the notebook will be in the deep cupboard part of the shelf, which is a relatively good idea. However, you have to remove it quick or else the entire desk will catch on fire based on this pin that's attached to it. It's a very elaborate and very complicated plan, but Light seems to know what he's doing because he's very smart. I will say this now, next to Shikamaru Nara, the next character I'm going to reveal in this series, and some other smart characters you can think of in anime, Light is definitely by far one of the most elaborate. I mean, I haven't seen anyone this damn intelligent and manipulative since Lelouch from Code Geass. This guy is smart. Anyway, we also get greeted to several different characters in this series, which include Light's sister, Sayo, his mother, I can't remember her name, so I just call her Mrs. Yagami because her role isn't very important in the show. And then we also get introduced to several other members. Most noticeably, we get introduced to the members of the task force. These members include Mogi, Aizawa, Matsuda, and Soichiro Yagami, which I revealed once before. The reason I mentioned these guys' names and no real others in the Japanese MPA is because the Japanese MPA decides to do investigations on the Kira case for a while, and then it even brings all of the national police together in order to do this investigation because Kira is an overall threat to the world. I should probably reveal that now. Due to the fact that each major criminal keeps dying, they decided to dub this overall killing as much more than just conventional heart attacks. I should explain a little bit of the logic of the Death Note itself for a minute. The Death Note has the ability to kill someone via heart attack. If you write their name down on the Death Note, then they will simply die of a heart attack. However, there's also different ways you can kill off people. These ways include writing a condition down in the Death Note in which the person will follow said condition to almost to a T and then they'll end up dying. Details of the death are usually written afterwards. Because of this, there's various ways that you can use the Death Note effectively if you know how to use it. Now, you're probably wondering to yourself, what does Ryuk have to do with all of this? Well, Ryuk basically chills around Light because when the Shinigami drops a Death Note and a human picks it up, the Shinigami has no choice but to follow the human around everywhere until they lose ownership of the Death Note. The only way to lose ownership of the Death Note is to give up ownership of it, die, or they pass ownership to it just like that. I mean, there's really no other real ways. Like, if you're just unable to use the notebook and you haven't touched it in a while, then I guess your ownership is relinquished. So, once all of that's said and done, Ryuk basically follows Light for the entirety of the series, or at least the entirety of the beginning. Ryuk is basically there to persuade Light to use the Death Note. However, it is up to him whether or not he wants to use it or not. Light proceeds to using the Death Note anyway because obviously it's the tool he needs to bring justice to the world. Along the episode lines, Ryuk also reveals several other things about the Death Note and the Shinigamis. Shinigamis are basically the god of death, and if you ever wonder why someone would die in a certain cause, it's more than likely because of them. Shinigamis kind of need to kill because it's their job. They're the god of death, and it also expands their lifespan. If a person were to die, then they boost all the lifespan that they would have lived, ends up adding on to the Shinigami's life. Shinigamis are initially immortal and can't really die, but there are several different ways to kill them. 2 in the series, as we believe right now. Ryuko also reveals that Light has the power to actually see people's full names without the need of having to learn their names via from like a book or the news or anything. This is known as the Shinigami Eyes. Getting the power of the Shinigami eyes will allow the user of the notebook in order to see people's names and how long they have to live. This is a very effective tool if you're planning on killing people with the Death Note. Here's the problem though. Once you accept the Shinigami ideal, half of your remaining lifespan is cut. Meaning that if you were supposed to live at age 60, you will die at age 30. Light refuses this deal with Ryuk to get the Shinigami eyes because he feels like if he's going to be a god of this new world that he's trying to create, then he needs to be alive as long as possible. So he'll try to find out people's names by other means. So, with that all said and done, Light continues to think of ways to hide himself. However, things get interesting and the plot thickens even further when a certain character learns that Light is from Japan. A couple of days have passed and the killings have happened, and one of the detectives known as L decides to show up onto the scenes. L, basically disguised as Lynn L. Taylor, some guy that was a criminal, ends up showing up and stating that he will bring Kira justice. Kira is also the name given to the serial killer murderer of each of the criminals. Due to the police's fear of Kira as well as everyone else thinking that killing criminals is still considered a crime, they view that Light's goal as twisted and somewhat serial killing-esque. Because of this, Lynn L. Taylor calls out Light. Once he calls out Light, Light basically wastes no time as to kill him by writing his name down. However, this was all a trick by L himself. You see, Lynn L. Taylor was not actually L. Lynn L. Taylor was a criminal that they had that was used strictly as a scapegoat because he was going to die anyway because he was sentenced to the death penalty. They used him and they only broadcasted things in the Kanto region of Japan rather than the entire world. Because of this, they learned that since they did the broadcast only in the Kanto region of Japan, that Kira is in the Kanto region of Japan, not anywhere else in the world, making it a lot harder or a lot easier for detectives to point out exactly where he's been. A lot of the police members actually are really impressed by how L was able to snuff out Kira so quickly. Now, as to where he is in Kanto, Japan, they don't know, but we have narrowed it down all the way to one spot. So, in other words, L tricked Light. This is where the real battle and the overall motif of this show basically begins. L feels that Light is, well, he doesn't know that Light is Kira, but L feels that Kira is nothing more than a serial killer, a maniac like murder whose childish ways of justice will cause his downfall. Light feels that he's true justice, and anyone who tries to get in the way is just as evil as the criminals that he's trying to erase. So the battle of cat and mouse is on between these two. Whoever catches the other person first will die. If Light finds out L's real name, then he can kill L off. If L finds out who Kira is, then Kira will be sentenced to death. And that's where the major battle goes as far as this entire saga. And with this, it makes things very interesting. A lot of people are siding with L, a lot of people are siding with Kira. Kira actually becomes a phenomenon and people actually make websites based off of him, while other people feel that Kira is evil and needs to be disposed of. One thing that I think is rather interesting is that L also deduced that the person needs a name and or a face in order to kill somebody. He deduced this based on the fact that he never shows his face. He's a detective that's only shown his face to a very few amount of people. L reveals his entire identity via a computer screen that only has the letter L on it. This makes things a lot harder for Light to figure out. At this point, L is on the investigation, tries to study the patterns of Kira's killings, and discovers exactly what is going on and how he kills. Light is overall trying to figure out how he can get close to the investigation in order to kill off L. Things get rather interesting, though, as they have some people go ahead and spy on several members of the task force that are in the investigation and their families. They do this because they realize that several criminals that have been dying are criminals that haven't been revealed to the public. Criminals that have only been revealed to certain people within the FBI. That means that each of the FBI member families have to be investigated by one of another FBI member. One of the FBI members that was sent out to investigate the Yagami family is known as Ray Pember. This FBI agent basically follows Light because they believe that Light has a schedule that's more flexible towards killing lots of criminals. We also see that the criminals end up dying in a way that would show that Light's free time fits that of a high schooler's. Light immediately picks up on his own patterns and tries to change them up so that they won't be on his tail as much. At this point, he realizes that Ray Pember's been following him thanks to Ryuk, and he basically sets up a plan in order to get him off of his back. One of these things included him being on a date with a certain girl, and when they were on the date, they head off to a bus in order to get to where they need to go. Ray Pember takes the bus as well, however the bus ends up getting hijacked by a robber. The robber then basically goes off as to try to kill everyone on the bus. Light strikes a deal with the FBI agent in order to try to find a way to change the situation so that they won't be in a hostage situation. Once things go according to Light's plan, the robber ends up touching the paper that he didn't know was a piece of the Death Note. The rule of the Death Note is that if anybody touches a piece of paper or the notebook itself, then they're able to see the Shinigami as well, which means that the robber ends up freaking out when he sees Ryuk, gets scared, runs off the bus, and ends up getting ran over by a car. The plan itself was just nothing but to kill a minor criminal, but the execution is what makes it really interesting. Light devised his entire plan with the hopes to get Ray Pember's full name so that he can kill Ray Pember whenever he wants. However, he doesn't do that right after the hijacking, or else L would have picked up on this and would have deduced that Light was Kira. Instead, he waits a week after, and he does something interesting. He throws off L's trail by making a bunch of criminals kill themselves inside of a jail by controlling the way that they die. This is nothing more than a red herring to throw L completely off. But during all of this chaos, a week after, Ray Pember ends up meeting up with Kira himself. He doesn't see Kira directly until the very end of their meeting, but it's basically Light wearing a giant jacket with the hoodie based on his eyes, so he can't really see him. Ray Pember follows all of Light's instructions to the T so that Light can gain a lot of information from the rest of the FBI members so that he can go ahead and kill them off so that they won't pick up on Light's trail and discover that he's Kira. After this, unfortunately, Ray Pember ends up getting killed right shortly after because Ray Pember unknowingly writes his name down on the Death Note along with the other members of the FBI agency thanks to Light. Ray Pember ends up dying, and the last thing he sees before he dies is Light Yagami's face, which confirmed that Light was Kira, but he's dead now, so he can't tell anyone. So with the death of several FBI members going on, Soichiro, Light's father, is informed that the FBI is no longer going to fund the Kira case. Why? Because so many FBI members have been getting killed off since then, and they don't want to risk it. So, what does Soichiro decide to do? Does he give up on the Kira case? No. He actually goes off and decides to be in a separate task force along with Matsuda, Mogi, Aizawa, and two other dudes. I can't remember their names because they don't really do anything. But anyway, those members decide to stay on the task force and continue the investigation with L. They decide to meet L face to face. And this is where things get a little bit more interesting. So, while they end up meeting face to face, while this is all happening, Ray Pember's wife, or fiance should I say, Naomi Maki or whatever her name is Naomi. And Naomi is actually known for her spin-off book. There's a book where she's in a spin-off where she actually solves a case with L, so she is closely related to L because she's a FBI agent as well. Anyway, Naomi was able to deduce basically everything that L was able to deduce. And she was also able to deduce a few more things based on the fact of what she saw while the whole case was happening on the train in which Ray Pember ended up dying, her fiance. So she was able to deduce a lot of things about Kira. And because of this, Light did not want this information to be sent off to L, because if it was, L would waste no time in going into this and would figure things out. Light goes in to give Soichio, his dad, clothes because he's been staying at the same hotel that Elle and the others have been staying at for a while. But during that, he ends up meeting Naomi. Naomi actually goes by a fake alias known as Maki, Makai or Maki. Because she went by a fake alias, she was hoping to meet up with the others and tell them all that she's deduced in the Kira case. Light decides to smooth talk her way away from the police quarters so that they can talk more about the Kira case, because Light has been doing investigation on it as well, even though he's the one that's Kira, so he's basically deducing a lot of things himself. Light smooth talks Naomi to a point where she's able to write her full name, she's able to reveal her full name. She somehow trusts Light because Light and Elle think a lot alike, and she feels that he could be very helpful towards the case. Since she reveals her full name, however, Light ends up writing it down by fooling her and making her think he's writing down like an address and a time, when in fact he's writing down her name. This is all up, and then Light ends up counting down. I should probably mention why he's counting down as well. 40 seconds after you write someone's name on the death note, usually the cause of death ends up happening. So Light counts down, and Naomi wonders why he's counting down, and Light basically reveals that he's Kira. At this point, there's nothing that Naomi can really do because the 40 seconds are up, and she ends up committing suicide by walking straight into traffic and getting hit by a car, thanks to the death note. So yeah, at this point, Light has gotten rid of like two of his largest obstacles, with Elle still being the largest obstacle, I guess, that's still in his way. Because of this, Light does graduate from high school, and later on is ended up headed to college. Once he's headed to college, Elle decides to actually go in and start to serve as a college student, quote unquote, and goes in as well under the alias Ryugo Ryuzaki. It's at this point that Elle meets up with Light and tells Light that he is Elle. This freaks Light out to a very high degree because Light figures that he can't kill Elle at this point. If he does, right after he just revealed his name, that would reveal that Light is Kira and he would be caught. But if he doesn't, then that makes things even harder for him. Light's not sure as to what to do as of now, but since the two actually rather get along due to their superior intellect and the way they view things and their various detective experiences, they decide to become close friends. Yeah, this works out really well, actually. I should also mention that before this all ends up happening, one last thing of investigation happens on Light, just to make sure that he's not Kira. This is really illegal to do in Japan, but one of the things that they decide to do is plant cameras all over the rooms of the families of the FBI members due to suspicion of them being Kira. Light actually finds out that someone was in his room because he lifts the hinges of the door a little bit, or it lowers the hinges of the door a little, and if someone enters them, then that means they rose up. That means he knew someone was in his room. Because of this, Light knows that there's cameras all over the place. Ryuk points out where all of the cameras are, and Light effectively finds a way to kill criminals while being investigated with the cameras. He even finds a way to check out the news via a tiny television that's placed inside of his potato chip bag, which is where we get the infamous "I'll take a potato chip and eat it" phrase. At this point, he's able to successfully kill criminals even while in surveillance. Anyway, after all of this is said and done and major events have taken place, one more thing comes into view to make the plot thicken even further. And this comes in the form of a second Kira. A while into the case, everyone's told to turn on Sakura TV while various riots were happening outside of the city about them bringing Kira down and bringing him to justice. At this point, a bunch of police members end up getting killed, and a giant bus crashes into the Sakura TV station. What ends up happening is that this guy ends up dying, and that we end up getting greeted to someone putting a videotape up sporting the name Kira. This isn't Light, however. This is someone else. This second Kira has donned the name Kira and states that they'll make demands in order to kill off several different police members and criminals. Elle immediately deduces that this isn't the same Kira as well, due to the fact that one, they've killed innocent police members, which isn't Kira's style, and two, everything that was set up was far too outrageous and sloppy for Kira's overall killings, as he's done smoothly before. Light deduces this instantly as well because, well, he is Kira. So he figures out that someone else must have a death note. Light tries his best to figure out who has the death note. And during this investigation, he also hangs out with Matsuda. Since Matsuda is technically one of the youngest members of the task force, the two basically hang out as if they're friends in order to be a way to spy on things to find out where the second Kira could be. We then get revealed that the second Kira is known as a young teen pop idol known as Misa Amane. Misa Amane basically finds out who is the original Kira based on the fact that she took the Shinigami eye deal with a Shinigami known as Rim. Rim gave her the Shinigami eye deal, thus cutting her lifespan in half. And I'll reveal a lot more about Misa in a minute. But basically, long story short, is that Misa ends up getting the Shinigami eyes, and anyone with a death note, their lifespan isn't visible. But everybody else's lifespan is visible if they don't have the death note. Because of this, Misa was easily able to find out that Light Yagami was the second death note owner, and she was able to find out his address and find out how to meet up with him. Because of this, Light ends up meeting face to face with Misa, which means that Kira has successfully met the second Kira. At this point, Misa reveals that she is the second Kira, and she's fallen in love with Light because Light is Kira. She's fallen in love with Kira ever since the day that she was supposed to be killed by a criminal, but the criminal ended up dying by a heart attack. So she's devoted all of her life to being one with Kira. Light is rather confused by this odd girl and her odd personalities, but decides to use this to his overall advantage and use the second Kira and her Shinigami eyes as a way to get rid of people. More specifically, Elle. However, when the days pass, Elle wastes no time confirming that Kira and the second Kira have met up due to the change of patterns in which the second Kira has decided to do things. This makes things rather difficult, but then things make a very dramatic, dark twist. Several things were revealed during the meeting with Misa as well, like how to kill a Shinigami. One of the ways a Shinigami can die is if they end up killing someone else and expanding the lifespan of that person that was going to die. How Misa ended up getting her death note was that this Shinigami named Jealous actually really adored Misa and watched her through the eyes of the Shinigami realm. She was about to get killed by a criminal one night, and before she ended up getting killed by the criminal, Jealous ended up writing the name in the death note, which means her lifespan, which was supposed to end that day, expanded. Since it expanded, the Shinigami had to give up his lifespan in order for that to happen, which means that Misa was spared, and then the death note was placed in front of her. Rim then takes the death note and puts it in his/her. Yeah, Rim's gender is very weird, but ends up giving Misa the death note. So the death note is in Misa's hands, which means there's 2 death notes now. 4 if you count Ram's and Ryuk's. So, with that all said, things get rather interesting. Light goes to college as usual, however, things make a very dark turn when Misa meets Light after a shooting that she had nearby, a picture shooting. Elle also makes it there as well, and Elle basically shows that he's a big fan of Misa, the teen pop idol name that she goes by, and through some chaos, Misa ends up getting touched on the butt. Because of all this chaos, which is really Elle stealing her phone, Light views this as his advantage. Since Misa has seen Elle, that means that she can give Light the real name via cell phone. Shortly after Light walks away in order to call things up, Elle ends up having the phone. When he has the phone, it is revealed sadly that they're basically caught. They were able to find out that Misa is the second Kira based on the facts that she had several different DNAs of hair strands that were inside of the plastic ceilings of each of the tapes. So now Misa is taken in for confinement. Since Misa is taken in for confinement, things take a very bad turn for the team. Now, since time is running in, I'm going to meet you all on the second half of this and do a repart recording. So I'll see you all then during the confinement half, but that will all still remain in this one section of the video. So don't worry, you guys. When I meet you all next time, I will talk about the confinement and then how the Kira saga basically ends and my thoughts. And we are back to continue this plot summary. Okay, so since Misa's been taken away to confinement, to be interrogated as the second Kira, Rem ends up threatening Light. Rem basically threatens Light because Rem actually has feelings for Misa. It's kind of odd, but Rem does have some odd human emotion like feelings for Misa. Rem basically states that if Misa were to die due to the interrogation and her blatting out that she's the second Kira, which would confirm that Light is Kira, by the way, then Rem will just kill Light. Light views the Rem that is in the way because of the compassion that she has for Misa. So Light tries to elaborately find a way to get rid of both Rem, L, and get them both out of interrogation. So Light ends up hatching up a plan that we don't get to see till the second video review that I end up doing, or if you watch the anime until later on during the series. But anyway, Light has a plan. And when Light has a plan, he basically cooks this entire plan up from square one. And what ends up happening is that Misa decides to go ahead and give up ownership of the notebook. When Misa gives up ownership of the notebook, or anyone for that matter, they basically completely forget everything they've done with the Death Note. So from the moment they had the Death Note and used it, everything is erased. They have no memory of doing it at all, which makes things very hard in the interrogation because they basically can depict that she's not lying because she doesn't remember anything. Anyway, Light decides to try to give up ownership of the Death Note as well, but not immediately. He states that he'll give up the ownership of the Death Note when he states the phrase, "get rid of it," to Ryuk. So, when they end up doing that, Ryuk buries Light's Death Note far away, and Rem takes the Death Note, Misa's Death Note, and flies away with it in order to take it somewhere else. So, when this all goes down, Light decides to go into interrogation. He does this because he states that he believes that he is Kira, and L basically confirms he thinks he really is Kira. Since Soichiro Yagami, Light's father, doesn't want to have his emotions in the way of this investigation, he decides to go into interrogation as well. It's kind of an odd choice, but it makes the most sense when you look at it through a father's perspective, I guess. Because he can't stand to see his son just in jail or interrogated. So various weeks pass while they're in interrogation, and killings stop for a while. When killings stop, that makes things even more and more pointed out that they could be Kira. Shortly after, though, Light decides to say the phrase, "get rid of it," which means he gets rid of ownership of the notebook. Because of that, Light completely loses all memory of everything he's done with the Death Note at that point. Meanwhile, several other days pass and they stay in interrogation, and then afterwards we know the killings continue to happen again. This means that Light is completely off the hook, well, almost off the hook, as well as Misa. However, L's still not convinced. He still thinks that something's up, or could possibly even be a third Kira out there. In order to figure out more of this, L decides to do one thing that's very drastic, and Soichiro is a key part of the plot for this scheme that he has. What ends up happening is that Light's father ends up getting out of interrogation as well as Light and Misa. They all get into a car. Soichiro Yagami is going to take them home, but instead drives them completely away into the outskirts of no man's land. Then he threatens to shoot Light. He does this so that he states that he'll shoot Light, shoot Misa, and then shoot himself for, killing his own son. At this point, Soichiro is ready to just open fire on Light's face. And while he does this, he shoots the gun. And when he shoots the gun, Light, Misa, and the others think that they're dead, but in actuality, nothing's happened. It was a fake shot. Like it was a blank. The plan basically worked. If Light and Misa were Kira, then they would have killed Soichiro way before all of that it went down, which would have confirmed that they're Kira. But if they were Kira, Mr. Yagami would have died. But they weren't, because they couldn't react in time. So it worked. The plan worked, and it was confirmed that Light and Misa are not the Kiras. So since everything basically went according to plan, they're basically off the hook for now. Misa's free to go, but Light decides to stay and help them with the investigation, and that basically ends the Kira saga for now. But the investigation of but is it all over? No, it's not. There's still tons of episodes left. But let's take a few minutes to discuss how I feel about the Kira saga itself. For the introduction of Death Note, I have to say it's really good. I found myself really in depth into this series when the plot thickened and thickened and thickened, and a mental battle of cat and mouse happened between Light and L, which makes the overall pinnacle for the entire series. The battle between Kira and L is basically what makes this overall experience worth it. It is what will drag you into Death Note. Just seeing how smart L is, and then seeing how smart Light is, just makes you ask the big question, who's gonna kill who first? The entire plot of this series, they basically can keep you in every time. There's no part of it that's boring. It's like, yeah, this isn't your stereotypical shonen anime that has to do with a bunch of battles. No, this is a battle of the mind. This is a giant chess game. And real people, criminals, and lives are at stake. The thing about Light is, I really like Light as a character, probably a little bit more than L. Don't get me wrong, L's awesome, but Light Yagami is just so elaborate, so great, so ingenious. For him not even to be one of the greatest detectives in the world, he's still just a great mastermind of pure manipulative evil. Light is awesome, and I really love his character, and it's kind of weird when you think he's the antagonist of the series. Or he could be the protagonist, however you view him. That's probably the one thing I like about Death Note, is that you can choose whether or not who's the protagonist and who's the antagonist in the series. Do you agree with L's views and think that Kira is just a murderous psychopath? Or do you agree with Light's views and feel that criminals need to be wiped out for the greater good? It's all a matter of how you feel, and it's a very wide and open anime that really helps your mind just think. And that's why I love Death Note so much. It's just great. It's a great series. I definitely recommend it to you. It's a very short series too, with only being 37 episodes. It's not that long, and it's, like I said, it's definitely worth the watch. So if you haven't seen this series, go check it out. And I probably spoiled a lot of it based on the summary, but it was mostly for those who who've already watched the series and wanted to basically hear the overall plot line of it. Or if you never plan on watching the series but still want to know what it's about. But anyway, yeah, I really love the Death Note series. It's definitely worth a watch. I love how each of the characters that come in can basically make the plot thick and harder and even harder. The relationship that Light has with Misa is a rather interesting one. It's more or less one-sided, with Misa being in love with Light. Even after the whole memory wipe that they both had, Misa's feelings for Light are overall general. So that's kind of interesting to note off. But Misa mainly loves Light because he is Kira. But based on the memory wipe, they have no idea of that. I really love how this saga in particular ends, because it ends on a rather happy note. With Light giving up ownership of the Death Note, he can basically start anew and just be a detective if he wanted to be. But there's plenty of more episodes to go out in the series, so if you're curious as to what happens, or like you already know what happens but want to hear my views on them, then you're gonna have to watch part 2. But overall, this show's definitely worth the watch if you want to see two intellectual minds just go at it. This is a really good show that opens your mind up. I've been a really big fan of detective animes ever since Case Closed, aka Detective Conan, which is a series I may or may not review in the future. It's a very long series, but it's cool to see how things can connect together piece by piece and just be so elaborate. I mean, hell, there were a couple of... If I were to say there was some downsides, though, I'd have to say that there have been some episodes in the series that don't really mean much. I mean, yeah, there have been episodes where Light basically shows how he hides the Death Note, or what he's doing in his daily life while the Death Note is being used. But even those episodes have their interesting, focal points because seeing how Light elaborately hides the Death Note is very clever. But I'll see you all in part 2, everybody, where we will tackle the Higuchi Saga or the Yotsuba Saga. So I'll see you all then. Tyrone God 3 out.